Because adversity is often the breeding ground for development, dive into Neurointerventional Stories, the uncensored interviews. Our guests, all leaders in the field of neurointervention, share the difficulties they face, the complications they have had to manage, and speak without filters on little discussed, sometimes controversial, or simply taboo subjects. Hi everyone, my name is Nanthiya Sujijantarat, and today I have a pleasure of being with Dr. Boccardi. Dr. Boccardi, how are you today?
Oh, I'm very fine, very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for hosting me here.
As you know, this podcast is named INR, the Uncensored Stories. So really this is to highlight your journey, your life in this field, the challenges that you have faced and the complications and anything that you want to teach the future generations going forward. You've obviously had a very successful career. You told me you now are retired. Why don't we take a step back to before you entered the field? Who are you? Where did you come from? And what took you here?
That's a very long step back. I was born in the 50s in northern Italy. I grew up in the 60s. So I grew up with rock and roll, with feminism, with student movements, with the movements against the war in Vietnam, all that kind of things that shape your mind and your future. And so after that, I have also had to study, and I became a doctor. And I was immediately interested in the brain, because the brain is a wonderful black box we know nothing about, and especially we didn't know anything about at that time. And so I wanted to study it and understand what was happening inside this box. So I became a neurologist, and neurology was fun at the time. But then in the mid-70s, the CT scan arrived. So I was a neurologist before the CT scan. and when the CT scan arrived, we finally could see what was happening inside the head without having to open it and to look after the death of a patient. And so neurology became very, very, very interested in CT scan. For that reason, I moved a little bit from neurology to neuroradiology. And I started working with CT scan and soon after with MR. But neuroradiology at the time was a very invasive technology and discipline, almost neurosurgical. We had to put needles everywhere. And I became fascinated especially by the vessels and by entering the vessels with catheters to do angiographies. And the step from angiography to interventional neuroradiology was very small. In the early 80s, I became very much interested in interventional neuroradiology, and the fact that by going with catheters, in small catheters inside the head of somebody, we could do, a number of things. Not very many. We had our arms at the time were detachable balloons, particles, and glue, and that was all. We had to wait until the early 90s to have coils, with Guglielmi detachable coils that came in the early 90s. So the whole decades of the 80s was very special. We had to fight aneurysms and AVMs with very little and very few things. But finally, coils came and a revolution started. Aneurysms finally could be treated endovascularly in a simpler way, which became simpler and simpler going on. And so many more people became attracted to this specialty. So before, there were probably 20, 30 centers in the world. Mm-hmm. And after coiling, there were 20, 30 centers in Italy, and more were coming. And of course, from then on, it's becoming what we see today. We had a lot of interesting things to do, and novelties were coming one after the other. Every 6 months, we would have new things to do and new ways to do the same things. So it was fascinating, and I'm very happy that I was part of it. And I could see almost all of it until now.
Wow, what a unique journey to be able to see from the very beginning before the CT comes in an MRI. One of my mentors used to tell me that, back in the days when the coils just came out, they would try to detach the coil, but because it takes so long, people would go out and take a smoke and come back.
Yeah.
And that would be when the coil is done.
Yeah. A story goes that Jacques Moret, who's hosting this Congress now, once he had to wait 24 hours before the coil would detach. Who knows? It's true. Maybe we didn't know how to detach it, and we learned a lot from that experience also. So, yeah, the beginning of everything is really challenging. And when you look back, you really almost laugh at it.
There's so many things to unpack. You basically just summarize
very,
very extraordinary decades. When did you retire?
It was 1.5 years ago, at the end of 22.
So pretty recently. Towards the last decade of your career was when thrombectomy kind of came to light. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How did that impact your career?
We started to try to eliminate clots inside the vessels. The first case I did was 1992. So we are talking, again, 30 years ago. That was with the injection of urokinase inside the vessel directly with a small catheter in the middle cerebral artery. And it was successful. So the first case, successful, that's the best that can happen to you because you want to do the second case. If you have a complication, in the opposite, that's not going to happen. So successful, and it was a young lady, 40-year-old lady, who had a stroke 1 hour before, and 1 hour later, she was on the table, and we could open the vessel, and she was perfect. So something probably it would not happen again now because you have to go through so many steps now. But anyway, so we started with that. And of course, it happened also with basilar artery occlusion that we would see somebody who was in complete coma. And after an hour, it was awake and going with his legs out of the hospital. So it was amazing. And since you have good results, you go on and you find the bad results. And it didn't work in most cases. And we started to think, well, maybe we shouldn't just lyse the clot. We should take it out. And a number of devices were designed to try to grab the clot and take it out. Finally, the stent retriever came and we started to use those. And the big trials came in 2015. And since the publishing of those trials, the world changed, and everybody had to devise a way to organize themselves for stroke management, which is a big war. Not everybody is ready for that. I was too old at the time to start doing this.
Can you tell me a little bit about your training paths?
So as neuroradiology is concerned, I became a staff in Milano, in my hospital in Niguarda, but immediately I was sent to spend a year in Toulouse, a city in southern France, which has always been very well known for a good neuroradiology department. That was 1984. And I had the chance to meet some of the most incredible people who were advancing the field at the time, and especially Pierre Lajoignasse. Unfortunately, he's not anymore with us. He was a genius. He very much shaped our discipline at the time. And he came to Toulouse once every while. Then people from France, the few from Italy, the few from the States, decided to meet once a year in an international meeting in Val d'Isère, which is also very well known. It's still going on, one of the most important meetings in our field, where people discuss anything very freely without any specific containment. I learned there how you should be very honest, say things as you think they should be. You know that you're talking to people who are your peers. They will respond with the same clarity and fairness and honesty. That was a major way to learn and to improve. But we were at the beginning 20, 25 from all over the world. And today the meeting is 500, 600 people. But then I went also to the States, and I spent a couple of months in San Francisco, another couple of months in Los Angeles. At the time, again, before the coils, it was a time of balloons. So Grant Hishima in San Francisco designed a silicone balloon, who was a major advancement, balloons that you could inflate and then detach. And we had to inflate them inside the aneurysms, take the shape of the aneurysm, and then detach them just by pulling on the catheter. It was, of course, not very simple. And
terrifying thought.
and it didn't work always. I would say rarely. But anyway, so it was, again, better than what we had before. Luckily enough, a couple of years later, the coils came and we didn't have to think about that anymore. So I think those were the experiences that had a major impact on my profession.
We'll shift gear a little bit. Let's talk about what was your biggest challenge in your career?
First of all, I have to say that I was and I am a very lucky person. So my life has been very good with very few obstacles. I always did what I wanted to do. I didn't have anybody above me to tell me, you should do this, you shouldn't do this. I had a chief. He was completely supporting me, whatever choice I would make. So I was also very much put on him. So very lucky. I was lucky also because more or less I was always at the frontier of what was happening. So I could choose any path because there was no path already drawn. Any path, I could be right, I could be wrong, I could come back, always in a very exciting manner. So from that point of view, I would say challenges, very few. The most important point for me to learn is to look at bad results. If you look at bad results, you learn much more than just by listening to, whatever good can happen. So I've always tried to create meetings on morbid mortality. We have created those in Italy. We have created those for Europe. The Jackson Hole meeting in the US. And so complication meetings are the most important. But they have to be well organized, meaning that you really should tell the truth. Because otherwise it's a loss of interest. If you don't say why something went bad, you don't learn anything. And if you don't go into all the details, you cannot understand very well, or you cannot discuss with other people. Maybe this little detail would have made a difference. Did you push a little bit? Did you pull? Did you give this drug? How much? And all kind of things. So all these details should be very well openly shown to everybody. And not everybody is able to do it. Mm-hmm. So complication meetings should not be open to all the people. So you have to put together a group of people who are friends, almost, mm-hmm. who can speak very sincerely and honestly. Mainly, you should respect mm-hmm. the other people, the one who's having the complication and who's telling you that he did a mistake. Otherwise, there is no interest in that. And you did mistake yourself, and you will have to tell other people that you did a mistake. So you want to have respect by the others, and you need to give respect. So it's not a simple meeting to build and to put together, but I think we mostly succeeded in doing that. So my challenge has been mostly to try to organize this meeting in the best way possible.
As you were speaking, one thing came to my mind. There's a really good book that I love called Thinking in Bets. Mm-hmm. The woman that wrote it is a poker player. One of the things that she talked about was that the process of making a decision and how people have a tendency psychologically to attribute good outcomes to their skills and bad outcomes to bad luck. And so sometimes you make bad decisions that result in good outcomes and you don't learn from it because you made bad decisions, but you're biased by good outcomes. Sure. And on the other side, you make good decisions, but the outcome statistically in a small percentage will always be bad outcomes. And so the process of examining whether you would do something differently is an important one. Yeah. And you have to be able to express that freely and safely in that sort of environment.
What you're talking about is very, very interesting in medicine, because medicine is all about statistics. Mm-hmm. And we know that maybe on 100 cases, 95 will go well and 5 not. So those 5 will be there. And if you look only at those 5, you think that you're doing, a terrible job. Yeah. But usually people look at the 95% and they say, oh, I'm so good. I'm the greatest of all, and so on. And they forget the 5. I think card playing, it can help you to understand how medicine works. Yeah. And I play bridge.
You play bridge?
Yes.
I don't know how, but I heard it's fun.
I love it. And that's probably the most important part of my life, because I started when I was 17. Since then, never spent one day of my life without something in my head which was bridge thinking.
Related.
Bridge related, yes.
Oh, that's so funny. All right, so we're going to wrap up the podcast by the 3 questions that we ask everyone.
Yep.
Okay. So the first one is that if you can take a journey through time and go back 10, 15 years, what would you do differently?
I'm not sure I would do certainly anything differently. Probably I would try more to be an organizer in my department. So I was the chief of the department, but I usually let other people do whatever they wanted because I trusted them and I loved them. So I believed that everything would go well even if I just didn't do anything about it. Maybe they missed a little bit of leadership in that situation. So I should have been more present in that kind of, organization of the department.
And if we fast forward 15, 20 years from now, how do you imagine the field will evolve?
Unfortunately, I'm not so optimistic about it. There are a few things that I believe are not in favor of being optimistic. And one is technology without reflection, without thinking about the patient mostly. So we tend more and more to look at devices, calibers, micrometers, materials, way of doing things, and we forget a little bit if it's worth all this for the well-being of the population. So this is one thing. And the other thing, which is very much related, is the commercial part of our job. So there are too much commercial interest, too much money talking. I was lucky to start when there was zero commercial interest in our field because we were doing the things by ourselves. We were doing our catheters. We were doing, we would attach the syringes to our catheters, just doing things with our hands. And only when coils came, then the industry became interested to our field. And that little by little, changed. We are now so much pushed by the industry that you don't know anymore if what you're doing, using your procedures and so on, are benefit related for the patient. And finally, I'm a little bit scared of where the whole world is going now, both from, the conflicts between populations and the conflicts with ecosystem. So are we going to have drinkable water in 20 years from now? Are we going to? So I understand this is not something we can answer, but the direction we are going looks not so optimistic for me. I will not be there, and I don't know what will happen, but I really see that for young people, there might be a struggle in the future, and not only in the professional field, but in everyday life. Sorry about that, but...
Do you have children?
Yeah.
You're worried for your children?
Well, of course. And especially I'm worried for the little kids who are born today, So what will be their future? Maybe it's only, something dark in front of my eyes. But really, if you look at everything which is around and you look at the news, but also if you look at science. So science is telling us that maybe we should change something, or it's already too late to change something. I hope it's not too late. Okay, let's say that. But the future of our profession, I hope it will go back a little bit to a closer relationship with the patient rather than with the device.
So what do you think we should do? What do you think we should do differently for the newer generations?
Well, I think open your mind, go to the movies, read books about, anything you want, but not medicine. So open your mind means learn about the real world, not, the little capsule we are inside now, all talking about aneurysm and AVNs, but there is something else around above that and beyond that. And maybe you kind of get a perspective of our job in a better way if you look it from outside rather than from the inside. Like being a Martian and looking down on the earth and seeing what's happening. Yeah. So, try to diversify your interests in many ways, in any way you like, but many ways, but still try to keep your feet on the ground and look at reality. Learn about reality, which means physics, and probably ask yourself many questions, which means philosophy. Philosophy is the way you try to understand and put together your experience.
And last questions is sort of related, but spun in different ways. So if we turn our attention to the training of the interventionalists that we put out today, what do you think we're not doing enough for the new generations coming out?
It's exactly that. So we tend to push more on technical aspects and less on, a general comprehension of the meaning of life. What's the meaning of death also? So if you don't know that, then you don't know how to speak to the patient about, the possibility of that something will go not in the best way. He might die. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. Can you explain it to somebody, and especially to the relatives of that somebody? Once she is not anymore there, you should learn how to speak to the relatives, to the people who are surviving a terrible accident that you may be the cause of. So that's something that usually is not taught, and we should teach more of this kind of things. How to behave is probably something that we don't teach enough.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Pleasure.